Okay. Hi, I'm Laura. I'm a grateful recovering addict alcoholic. So my sobriety date is February 4th, 2024. I sponsor women. I am actively sponsored. My sponsor has a sponsor. My sponsor does know where I'm at tonight. And okay, I'm just gonna start this off with, man, I'm really nervous. Okay, so I always get this way before I give a lead, but one of the things that I love most is, okay, so I sit here and I play over in my mind, okay, what is the topic I want to speak about? Like, what parts of my story am I going to share? Because I was in active addiction for over 20 years. This is my first time since I was 14 that I've managed to put together any time sober. So as I'm going over these parts of my life in my head, it's always cool because I learned something new about myself and my addiction and how my thinking worked. And I just get these little light bulbs, right? Okay, so growing up, my mom, she is Korean and she met my dad in Korea. They got married and she came over to the States. So she's from a very different culture. Like what you guys see in the movies with the Asian moms, like all that was so true with my mother. Like typical Asian mom. I had an older sister and a younger brother, right? And with me, it was if I brought home anything less than an A, I would get grounded. B's were frowned upon, but if I dared bring home a C, like it was grounding. It was straight A's were expected from me. She put me in every activity known to man. Like I did dance, I did gymnastics, I did piano, I did volleyball, soccer, basketball, cheerleading. I mean, every night of the week, I was always in some type of activity and I always had something to do. Whereas my older sister and my younger brother, they got to go play with their friends and they got to be kids. Whereas I always had something my mom wanted me to do. And that was the first time in my life that I really felt like I didn't belong. Like, even with my family, I felt like I didn't belong there because it's like, why is so much pressure being put on me from such a young age, 6, 7 years old, whereas my brother and my sister get to do whatever the hell they want? And so what I realized, the light bulb that clicked onto my head is, okay, when I was younger, I would read. And it wasn't just reading books. It was excessive. Like in sixth grade, I remember I got sent down to the principal's office for reading in school. My parents would take my books away because I would read at the dinner table. I would read walking through the grocery store. And I realized that like books were my first escape from reality. It's what I could go and do so I didn't have all that noise and that clutter in my head, you know. And when I turned 13, 14, I started with the drugs and the alcohol, because reading wasn't cool. So I found some other way to escape that noise in my head, and that was with drugs and alcohol. And like throughout my life, I feel like I've lived so many different lifetimes, because pretty much every drug out there, like I've done, and I spent couple years, 4, 5, 6 years addicted to that drug. And then I'd put it down and I'd be proud of myself. I just switched substances though. And I went through the whole teenage years. When I was about 19, 20, I moved on to the harder stuff. And I ended up putting that down. I met my husband, I had 2 kids, and it's like I'm proud of myself because I put that hard stuff down, but I still needed that escape from reality. I still needed to quiet that noise in my head. And I picked up prescription medication. And it's like in my mind, I justified it because, I'm an addict. I justify everything. And I justified it like it was okay because it came from a doctor, like they sell this at the pharmacy. So this can't really be hurting me. And throughout my marriage, I was with him. We were together off and on for 12 years. I was a PTO treasurer. I did all the things, helped the kids with the homework, doctor's appointments. I had my 2 kids and 4 stepkids that I was raising, and on the surface, everything looked fine, but we were hiding my addiction. My husband knew, but we were hiding my addiction from the kids. Um, Eventually, the second time me and my husband split up, we went through court and it was like 18 months, 2 year long custody battle. And, toward the end, like I just gave up because, I started to turn back to those hard drugs again. I needed a bigger escape from reality. And, I told myself, well, I don't want my kids to see me like this. They were like around 6 and 8. Like, I don't want them to grow up in this type of environment. And my husband's a normie, or my ex-husband's a normie. So, like, at the time, I told myself, well, I'm just going to give him physical and legal custody because, it's better for the kids to be in that stable environment. Now in sobriety and with the growth that I have, I look back on it and yeah, a part of it was that, but a big part of it was I didn't want to be accountable to anyone anymore. Like, if I'm being honest, I didn't want to wake up and get them ready for school. I didn't want to have to put dinner on the table. I didn't want to have to help with homework. I wanted to be selfish and do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, you know? So I ended up giving him legal and physical custody. And I started seeing someone, and he ended up committing suicide and passing away. And like that's when I really went off the rails. You know, I I was bad out there. So I got into the hard drugs, the really hard drugs. Did things, all those yets I said, I would never do, I ended up doing. And, I couldn't hold down a job. I couldn't be a functioning member of society. So I turned to the streets. I started selling my body. I started selling drugs, anything to get money so I would be able to keep myself in that constant state of just like numbness. And I ended up like toward the end of my run, toward the end of my addiction. I caught about 5 or 6 cases, about like 34 felony counts, a handful of misdemeanors. And like those last 3 months I was out there, like I didn't, I heard about AA, I heard about NA, but I didn't know too much about them because all I knew was the people that went into the program and came back out. I never saw it be successful for anybody because those just weren't the type of people I surrounded myself with. Um, so I didn't know how to stop. I knew that I wanted my life as it was to stop. I knew that, my life was unmanageable. It was so unmanageable. But I didn't know how to quit it. I didn't know that there was a program, and I thought that my only options were going to be prison or death. So those last couple months, I intentionally overdosed. I probably overdosed about 15, 20 times, and I would say half of those were intentional. And they would always bring me back, and it got to be the point where my friends knew to keep Narcan on them because I would try. So that didn't work. And I kept getting arrested, getting these warrants. They would catch me on the warrant, give me new charges, send me to jail, let me back out. So the prison didn't work. So that last night, it was February 3rd, 2024, I went out there and I was on a mission and I was either going to die and be dead, dead. No one was going to bring me back with Narcan, or I was going to get caught and I would do something to keep me in jail and keep me in prison, just to get me out of this life I was living. So we were driving around in the car. I did what I did. I ended up overdosing, and like all the times I've died before, I've never went anywhere. Like it was just always black and I would wake up again, it was like falling asleep. But this time I went somewhere, and this was like the first like major spiritual experience I had. And I went somewhere, it's like this cold, icy blue cavern. I could hear my boyfriend yelling down. It was like from a tunnel, and he was telling me to breathe, because I wasn't breathing. And, it's not so much like what I saw, but it was those feelings that I felt when I was there. Like the despair and the loneliness and how terrifying it was. And like something clicked in my head, and it's like, okay, if I continue on this path, this is where I'm going to end for all of eternity. And I don't want to spend the rest of my eternity in this wherever I am. Um, so allegedly, I don't know, yeah, everything's really fuzzy. I apparently jumped out in front of a cop car, out of the car in front of a cop car. They ended up taking me to the hospital, and like my first clear memory is waking up being handcuffed to the hospital bed. So I got up, the doctors cleared me, they took me right to the paddy wagon, took me to Kane County Jail. And that was the first time, like, in a while that I had felt safe. I slept for 2 weeks straight. I woke up just to eat, went back to sleep again. The COs told me, they're like, well, we have 3 different facilities we're looking at. We're just waiting for a bed to open up and we're going to send you to treatment. So I'm like, okay. So a couple days after they told me that, I went to court. And I remember, so my public defender came to get me out of my cell to take me into the courtroom. And I remember, like, I sat there and straight up argued with him. He's like, you're going to treatment. I'm like, no, bro, just send me to prison. Like, I don't want to go to treatment because, treatment would be hard. Like, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a house. I had literally the clothes on my back. I didn't even have shoes when I got arrested, and like, okay, so they sent me to treatment, but what's going to happen after that? Like, I would have to rebuild my life, and I don't know how to do that. So I figured prison would be my better option. So we argued back and forth for like 5 minutes. He's like, no, you're going to treatment. Took me in before the judge. And we're standing before the judge. The judge is like, well, we have a bed that opened up at a treatment center. And I remember the prosecutor saying, no, she's a danger to herself and she's a danger to the community. She belongs in jail. She doesn't need treatment, and like, I remember thinking, well, I'll show her, like, how dare she say that about me? So the judge is like, well, no, she's going to treatment. And the prosecutor was like, well, she's going to run based on her history. She never shows up for court. So she needs an ankle monitor. And the judge is like, no, she doesn't need that. She just needs help. And I remember just what was going through my mind was, well, she told me I couldn't do it. So of course I'm going to be defiant. And yeah, I can do it. I can sit down in treatment and I am going to make it through treatment. And that stubbornness, those character defects that I had, that's how, they came to play in my favor. Like, so they sent me to treatment, and I spent the first couple weeks like going through the motions and everything. It was difficult at times, but I managed to stay there. I didn't run, even though it crossed my mind several times. Um, and I was just doing what I was told, going through the motions. And every night they would bring in a different fellowship to talk to us, whether it be AA, NA, CA. And one night someone came in and she started to tell her story. And like the first thing I noticed about her, right, was like this like light in her eyes. And she was just happy. And you could just tell when she talked, when she smiled, like the light shone from her eyes. And as she's telling her story, like pieces of her story started to hit me. And it's like, damn, that happened to me. Like I went through that. Like that happened. I mean, it was just eerie how it was so similar. And then, it got me thinking, and I'm like, well, wait, if she's gone through these experiences, the same ones I've been through, and she's sober and this happy, like, how the hell do I get that? So I went up and I talked to her afterwards, and, my exact words, the first thing I said to her was, I don't know about this God shit, but I want to learn a little bit more about AA. And she's like, okay, and she said something that really stuck with me that like I guess never clicked before. She's like, why don't you give it a shot? Like try it out for a year. If you don't like it, you can always go back, but what's a year in the grand scheme of things? And I'm like, oh, I can't go, but like it's still going to be out there, even though I'm removed from it, doesn't mean that everything's going to go away. So I'm like, okay, I'll commit to a year. She became my sponsor. She's still my sponsor, best sponsor in the world. She's so amazing. But we made it through treatment, and it's like nobody ever like told me what to do, but like I kind of knew the steps. Like, okay, I'm gonna go into sober living. I'm gonna do IOP. So that's what I did. The first sober living I got into. And man, I'm telling you, like these steps saved my life, but sober living taught me how to be a functioning, productive member of society again. Like, because when I went in, we were just talking about this tonight at my home group, like I was a train wreck. Like I was so bad when I came into sober living, when I first came into this program, and it taught me how to, be considerate and to be nice and to get along with women. So, coming to these meetings and starting with AA, like we had our mandatory meetings, like I finally felt at home. Like I finally felt like I belonged, all through my life. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I didn't even feel like I belonged in my own family because I was so different. I was the black sheep, you know, but coming into AA, seeing all these strong women and knowing that we have one thing in common, and that's we want to stay sober, and if I have something in common with these women that work a great program and they're happy and they're sober and they have years and decades of sobriety, then maybe I'm worth something too. So started working the steps, got through the steps, started sponsoring was I sponsoring? Yeah, I was sponsoring other women. And so okay, my sponsor, she's like a big, like, she'll send me a flyer and she's like, okay, dude, we're going to do this. Mark this on your calendar. There's no asking, do you want to do this? It's, we're going to do this. So she sent me a flyer for a convention down in, I think it was in Springfield or Decatur, Illinois. And she's like, okay, we're going to go do this. And I'm like, all right. So I asked off for work, and it was ISCYPAA, it's the Illinois State Convention for Young People in AA. And like I went there and like I'm telling you, dude, like, okay, so AA, I felt at home, but like YPAA and being at ISCYPAA and this YPAA community that I found, this is like the piece of my program that I didn't know was missing, right? Like I finally felt at home, and it was so cool because we went to ISCYPAA, had a blast. It was so great. And, I came back and so I'm walking into my Sunday night meeting and I start talking about ISCYPAA with somebody else. And someone new walks in and she's like, oh, I was at ISCYPAA too. We started talking and I'm like, I want to bring YPA to the area that I'm in, because I feel like we need that vibe, we need that energy. And so we started talking and it's like, and this is how I can tell when it's my will versus God's will or when my will aligns with God's will. Like my will, I feel like, it's what is a square peg in a round hole, I'm trying to shove it in and it's not going in, but God's will, it's like a row of dominoes. Like everything just like falls into place, right? So we start talking about ISCYPAA, and I start talking about I want to bring YPAA to the Elgin area. I would love to bring ISCYPAA to this area one year, and she's like, well, I just moved here, so okay, let's start a YPAA meeting. And that's how Sunday night's not dead yet. Sunday nights at 8:30 in Elgin. If anyone's in the area, it's a great meeting. I love that meeting. And so I start talking and I'm talking with a couple people and I'm like, well, I want to bring ISCYPAA to the area. And they're like, okay, slow down. Cause I'm an addict and I was just talking about this tonight. Like I want more. I want more of everything. I want more drugs. I want more money. I want more attention. And in sobriety, like it's not just those bad things. The drugs are out of the picture, but like I want more of the good things too. Like I want more school, I want more service commitments. And I have to like really be careful. And thank God that I have my sponsor, that I have my higher power, that I have this strong circle of women that tell me to sit my ass down and calm down a little bit when I'm doing too much, because I have a tendency to do that. So I got all these big ideas, and I want to start a bid for ISCYPAA for 20, what year are we in? For 2027. And they're like, okay, whoa, Laura, like, oh, time's up. Okay, can I read one last line? Okay, so I want to end with this line from the big book. Like right after we decided to form this meeting, we were reading this in a meeting and I loved it. So, God is on page 164. God will determine that, so you must remember that your real reliance is always upon him. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. And like, I feel like in these past 6 months, like, he has really pulled everything together and he has given me the fellowship that I crave in not only in AA, but in YPA. So that's all I got. Thanks for listening, guys.